Well, ladies and gentlemen, we hope you're well fed and well rested because it's time to talk tennis. This is Eat Sleep Tennis. I'm Alex, and joining me, as always, from the other side of planet Earth, somewhere in the future, I believe. Steve, how's it going? How are things in the glorious country of Australia?
Good. I mean, good for me. I'm not in hotel quarantine like a number of the top players, but it's been a bit of a dramatic couple of days over here. I don't know how much you guys have heard about what's going on, but it's been tricky. Yeah, it's been interesting viewing. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I've heard just a little chitter and chatter there. I know somebody wrote something about it, that was very personal and well done that I enjoyed. But Candice, how are you? How are things on the other side of the country? I mean, I know that you're in new digs here, so kind of a fresh setup, which is why you don't have the lovely background maybe you always do, and we might have a cameo from your wonderful dog. How are things?
They are good. I am on the floor, so that's always fun when you don't have furniture, but I'd rather have a home than have furniture, so it's the better end of that trade-off. And yes, the dog is roaming around, and since I'm on the ground, she's going to think, oh, it's playtime. So the chances of her not popping in here and giving her tennis insight is very slim, but we'll see. Maybe she'll pick the winner.
Yeah, I think house over furniture is important. You need to have a house with the furniture in it. It's kind of like backwards doing it that way. Don't you agree, Steve?
Completely agree. It's nice having both, though.
All right, enough chitter chatter here. We are here to talk a little bit of tennis. Today will be our first Challenger show. We've done a WTA tournament. We've done a couple ATP tournaments, and because Challenger is a little different in that there's not a futures market, there's not an outright market necessarily. Our conversation is going to be a lot different. Instead of going through the draw and trying to pick outrights and look for quarter prices and things like that, these conversations will hopefully, be maybe a little more brief and a little more focused on kind of prospects and talking about some of the players we know a little bit and try to help you understand, what to look for in future tournaments, what to look for kind of match to match here. So, Steve, anything else you want to add to kind of that description? I think I got most of it.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good summary of what we're trying to achieve, I guess, with these shows. And obviously this is the first Challenger tournament. So, a lot of these players either didn't participate in Australian Open qualifying or lost in Australian Open qualifying. So, there should be high motivation over the next couple of weeks. But I guess as the year progresses and you see these players either coming up to that Challenger level as a wild card or as lower ranked players making their way up, or players who are kind of crisscrossing between Challenger level and, the ATP level, that's where we're going to kind of see, and there's a bit of a challenge, I guess, and that's aptly named Challenger, to try and figure out where that form level from the different levels of the tour really match up here. So, it's a bit more of a straightforward start in terms of knowing everyone's going to be motivated, but, we've probably got one of the weaker Challenger fields that we'll see for 2021.
Well, with that much enthusiasm, folks, let's dive in. We'll start by taking a look at the first quarter here. I think Steve was nice enough to put together a little graphic for us there. We've got Gallen, and now he doesn't have a bye. There will be a qualifier there, but we don't know who that is yet. Kirkin, Lorenzi, Zapata, Morales is against Tabner. Selic, Bellick, I forget who is there. Unfortunately, the little wonderful logo there is black.
Oh, hang on, I can get that away. And we had Kovalik there as well.
Kovalik, that's right. We got Kovalik there in the bottom. And we have the first dog sighting there with the tail. That was quite wonderful. Very much enjoyed that. We'll start with you, Candice, here, and then go to Steve. As you start to look at some of these names, who kind of pops out here? My first look would be to Gallen, obviously, who's a good player, but this maybe isn't necessarily a surface. It looks like it will be indoors since there's snow on the ground and it's going to be very cold. So that seems to be the deal. That in the Challenger photo literally says indoors on it. So Candice, as you start to look at this group, who pops out?
Yeah, I mean, I think much of the same. You look to Gallen, obviously, first there as the number one seed, but probably the wrong surface. And that's the case for a couple of players, not only in this group, but we've seen it just in tournaments early in the year. We've said, wow, if this tournament was on clay, it would be a good one. And that's what you kind of see when you look at this one. Lorenzi pops up just because if you do watch tennis on a regular basis, away from challengers, you probably have seen him and heard the name before. But I think in these types of tournaments, you want to kind of lean towards the players who can be really improving and still have potential versus, a kind of a long mainstay like a Pablo Lorenzi.
Yeah, the tennis vampire maybe has an interesting chance here to steal a quarter and have some fun in this tournament. And the other name kind of in the bottom half that stuck out to me was Zapata Morales. I think he's maybe someone that we think maybe more of as a doubles player, but curious to see how he does. With frankly this kind of soft first quarter. I mean, what do you see here, Steve? I mean, who sticks out to you here? I know you said this isn't maybe the best Challenger field, but what do you think here?
Yeah, it's probably not the strongest quarter that we'll see, and we'll make more of a note about that as we move along. But looking to that kind of bottom match there, the Salik Balik versus Kovalik match, I think that may actually kind of shape this particular quarter. I think, whoever wins that match, I think, it will be a good form line for them moving through. It's hard to get excited about Galan and Lorenzi, and Kirkin did look good at the low level at the end of last year, but then really struggled against Berrettini the other week. So hard to know there. And again, I would be interested to see Morales versus Taverner on clay. I think that would certainly be a more enjoyable match, I think, from a viewing standpoint. But you could make a case there for Morales, but I think Taverner's serve is certainly going to be a little bit stronger. And when we're looking at these conditions that we're going to have here in Istanbul, that it may come down to that Taverner serve and how well he can find it. So look, to be honest, I think that Salik Balik versus Kovalik match, I think, has the ability to kind of shape this first quarter.
Yeah, the Salik Balik match, you're right, is if he can make it through there, that he's one of the guys that I would kind of circle as, again, if we did have quarter prices here or futures, I bet we'd get a nice number on him, because if he comes in here and plays some nice tennis, again, he'll have the matchup and the skills needed to make it through here. So that was the other name I had circled as kind of an underdog. So maybe a value pick to look at throughout the week.
And I think with that, particularly for wildcards, this is a massive opportunity for these players that they've come straight into a challenger draw, and they do have the ability to earn points when not all the players above them are playing either this week or in the weeks ahead because of COVID restrictions and whatnot, and some having a preference of not playing due to the ranking points freezes and being comfortable with where they're positioned.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. All right, unless you guys have anything else, I think we can jump into the second quarter and move forward here. Bagnes, Zhang, Husler, Andriozzi, Nakashima, Ilkel. Again, there's not a buy there. We have a qualifier that we popped in there to play Gunnar Swarn. This looks like Nakashima's quarter to lose to me. I mean, I'll start with you this time, Steve. Is that the case here, or can you see anybody else maybe taking this from him?
Look, I think any quarter that's played on an indoor hard court that's got Bagnes as the top seed is pretty attackable for some other players. I think that the two that kind of stand out, and look, the two that I probably had an eye on when I looked at the list of players coming into this particular draw was Nakashima and Husler, and it's a shame that they are in the same quarter. Ilkel did look good, I think, in patches of his AO qualifying attempts, but Nakashima is one of those ones that I don't know if you guys agree, but just been waiting for him to kind of come on and show a little bit more consistency, I guess, in his game. He has shown some of those real flashes of brilliance, towards the start of last year, and just didn't quite find it, I guess, when the tour resumed to the extent that I probably thought. But I'd be curious to hear what you two have to say about this quarter as well.
Hey, Candice, why don't you jump in?
It's going to be more of the same about Nakashima. I do think he's the one to beat in the quarter. Of course, some people might remember when he took a set off for Zverev at the U.S. Open. So when you're able to show those type of flashes of talent at only 19, that's usually a very good sign. I agree to a degree with what Steve is saying. He kind of rounded out the end of 2020 well. I believe he won a challenger out in Orlando, but losing, first round of Australian Open qualifying to, I think it was Karatsev or somebody, is not exactly inspiring coming into this. So you would need a sharp improvement off of that. But at least we know the ability is there. Again, it's about the consistency. But I think if you're going on a match-by-match basis, then he's interesting in that regard.
Yeah, as a younger player, he's definitely been very frustrating. You see the immense amount of talent he has, but really struggles in some of the more important points. And in a lot of ways, that's something that kind of pushes you away from him. But at the same time, this kind of tournament, this kind of field is almost like a building block moment for him. If he is going to grow and become kind of the player that we think he's going to be, this should be a tournament where he makes kind of a long run. Steve, you make a great point, though. Unfortunately, he's got Husler here in his quarter. I think, again, probably the two best players in this field. So I think that's what we'll see there at the quarterfinals, the two of them. And, the winner there probably looks pretty good to take out everybody the rest of the way.
Yeah, and I think when you look and using Nakashima as an example, when there are a couple of other younger players at challenger level who I guess, have generated a lot of hype very, very quickly. You know, you look at Alcaraz, who's, you know, qualified for the Australian Open. You will notice when I write a lot of my previews, if anyone you know does read and follow along with those, that very rarely do I side with them because I just don't see any value, particularly in their prices, because I guess there is a greater element of inconsistency when you look at their ceiling and what they're able to produce, you know, on their day, that, you know, that they do have the talent to beat, you know, some pretty good players, but it's just that consistency at their level that sometimes I'll throw up a performance and you kind of look at it and you go, well, hang on, where on earth does that come from? And it's more kind of looking back and go, well, you know, they're 17, 18, 19 and still trying to find their way week to week. So, you know, it is worth keeping in mind when you look at some prices for some of the younger players and go, oh, well, that does look like value, that, you know, there can be a little bit more variance, I guess, in their performance week to week compared to, you know, maybe a Lorenzi or someone in the other quarter who's, you know, used to, you know, a couple of decades on tour and knows a little bit about week to week performance.
Yeah, when you get down to this level, you do have more players in the field that have never sort of put it together and made the kind of run to win a tournament like this. And it takes a certain level of mental strength, mental fortitude, if you will, to play tennis that well, that many times in a row and be able to kind of make it through a week. So you got to think about that when you start to look at this field. Looking at age and looking at experience, for me personally, I think is really important when you're looking at fields like this. What do you guys think?
I mean, it definitely plays a role. It's not even just the mental, but the physical as well, knowing how to manage your body from match to match. That's something that just comes from age and experience to a degree. So it's understandable why, as Steve kind of alludes to, that the variance or the consistency between performances is much smaller for the more experienced players, because you've done this. You know what you need to do between matches to have yourself ready the next time around. And I think you probably have the experience in match as well to know, okay, you know what, this game is lost or this set is lost, let it go, come back in the next set, versus a younger, more inexperienced player might kind of just keep putting it all in and using yourself physically in moments where maybe it's not optimal to do so.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. All right, anything else here, or are we ready to jump into the third?
I think we head straight into the third.
So we're now in the top half of the bottom half of the draw. I just love saying that because it sounds funny. Musetti, Petrovic, Rolla, Bonzi, Gistino. Sorry, I don't know why I want to say Tano there at the end. Giannessi, Gomez, and Oang. I assume it's Oang. He's French. You're not supposed to say most of the consonants, I'd imagine. You know, a pretty decent little group here. Musetti is kind of a fun player. Oang, you know, has a lot of talent here. I mean, some of the names in the middle aren't necessarily as great. Start with you here, Candice, this time. I mean, who pops out to you? Who do you see kind of taking this quarter? Does anyone kind of excite you to maybe win even the whole kit and caboodle?
I mean, it's a little obvious, I suppose, but I gave a long look when we were looking overall at the field to Antoine Oang. Potentially maybe better on clay than we expect to see from him on a hard court, but he's another one who has shown some flashes of ability. He's 25 now, so he's not necessarily a youngster, but it does seem as if during the past year or so, he's begun to come into his own to a slight degree coming into this. I do like that he at least won a match in his Australian Open qualifier as well. Most of these guys were unable to do that, so just winning one, it doesn't matter if it's against somebody who's over the hill as it was, but I'll take a win coming into this because, again, most of these were unable to do that. He also finished off 2020 very well. I believe he lost in the final of a challenger over in Italy. So Oang for me is the one who kind of jumps off the page. Potentially the wrong surface, but definitely has the ability, I think, to make his way through a couple of matches.
Yeah, the only other name that stuck out to me is Bonzi. Again, I know that he hasn't played a lot, I think, against guys at some of this level, but you know, a lot of nice numbers for him last year in 2020, playing at maybe a lower level. Steve, what do you see here?
I think for me, obviously, the big name and the one that a lot of people who've probably followed, you know, more so that clay tennis towards the end of last year is Musetti and what he was able to do in a couple of those challenges late in the year, you know, beating Stanford Rinker and the like. But he's one of those examples as a youngster, you know, indoor hard court where he hasn't shown as much against, you know, starting against a very big server who, you know, looking at the current odds is probably value in their round one match is somewhere that I'm probably going to avoid. You did mention that Alex Bonzi, and look, Bonzi's best is great, but Bonzi's worst is really, really tough to watch. So again, it's that consistency and inconsistencies that we'll see a little bit more at this level as well. So I guess that's what's probably putting me off, I guess, thinking about him, if there were outright markets to have a little bit of a look at. I am, leaning towards, following you two in with the Frenchman at the bottom there. Hoang, I think, his form, as you said last week, was good, and then it was bad. But I think if you look at the body of work that he's been able to generate away from clay, when you look at some of these other clay quarters here, Roller has a big serve and could maybe get away with a win or two if he serves and red lines. But look, I'd be leaning towards Hoang here as well. I think it's the safer of the picks. If this was outdoors in windier conditions, Gomez might have more of a chance in this first round. But look, I'd be leaning towards the Frenchman here, I think.
That's a little consensus there from us. I think we're ready to move on to the final and fourth quarter here. Steve will bring that up for us in just a second. So nice with this stuff. Soda, Tabillo, again, a qualifier there, not a bye against Greek Sport, a qualifier against Gaio, Safwat, and Seabolt Wild. Again, a couple names you see in here, kind of the theme of the week. We wish this were on clay, but it's not. Candice, what do you think of the fourth quarter?
You echoed my sentiments. I wish this was on clay. Maybe just taking it away from this tournament a little bit. I'm very excited to see what Thiago is able to do throughout the course of the year. It felt like last year we really saw a big step forward for him. Obviously, he was able to win. I think it was a 250 when he defeated Casper Ruud, you guys' favorite clay court homie. So if you can beat him on clay, then you definitely have some ability. We'll see how he's able to do here on the hard course. But I think as a general prospect moving past this tournament, he's the one who I'm easily most excited to see.
Yeah, again, kind of a younger player, similar to what I said about Nakashima. If he's going to continue to move forward and get better, this is a nice spot for him to get some hard court wins under his belt. Steve, what do you see here in the final and fourth quarter?
Again, look, I'm going to echo exactly what you've said around. It would be great seeing this on clay. I think Greek Sport, maybe if he serves big and plays big, could make a little run here. If you look at the odds for the first round, I think Tabillo there's a lot of value in his price just off his really poor performance last week against Hugo Dalian. It's not tournament winning form, Tabillo, but I think he could take a scalp there and knock a seed off in the first round. Again, though, it might shape a little bit by the qualifiers that come through and have had a couple of wins under their belt to make their way in here. I think if you find yourself against Gaio in that first round, that you can maybe get a couple of wins under your belt there. But it's similar, I think, in a way to that first quarter. It's probably not the strongest. I think most of the stronger players fall in that second and third quarter.
All right, I think that just about sums up our thoughts there in general. Again, as we start to look through, we always try to pick a winner here. Now, Steve, I know you have the banners up here. Who do you want to go first?
Look, we'll start with you, Alex. Why not? We'll go in alphabetical order.
All right. I believe in Brandon Nakashima. I think he's just immensely talented. I think that at some point he is going to put it together. And I am someone that tries to get, kind of ahead of the curve there, maybe a little more than I should. But love his talent, love his draw here. I know it's tough having Husler there, but if he gets through that match, I think that gives him kind of the confidence he needs to close out here. So I think, this is hopefully a start to a good season for him. I like him, and I'd take him to win.
Perfect. And how about you, Candice?
I'm going to be going the same. I like Brandon Nakashima to win this tournament. I love his potential. I think that in general, if he can make his way through a couple of matches, that a tournament like this filled with kind of natural clay quarters should suit him from a style perspective. Just a matter of the consistency, but I like what I've seen from him thus far.
Perfect. So, look, I'm going to go somewhere else. We're not going to end up with consensus. But, look, part of my reasoning for going to the other half of the draw is because I do rate Nakashima and what he's able to do. But I also rate Husler in the same quarter. And I guess I'm trying to move away from what's a pretty competitive quarter there. So I'm actually going to go with Hoang as my pick. I think it's a very attackable quarter for him if he can find, a semblance of his form from late last year, or, having that more decent body of form. So I did see in some of the live comments, for those who are watching along with us live, had a question about Hoang winning the quarter. So I'm pretty, I do like his chances, I think, here. And as I said, that Husler and Nakashima should be able to battle out that second quarter. I did have a chat with a friend of the show, Vinny, who's at Matatips Tennis, who I think his pick for this week, or one that he's really keeping an eye on, is Husler as well. So there could end up being a little bit of a battle there later in the quarter between two pretty talented players that I'm sure we'll see a lot of for the rest of 2021.
Yeah, so that answers the other question in the chat. Yes, we like Oong to win the quarter. That was actually something all three of us stacked hands on there. I think we covered all the questions that are floating around in there. Was there any questions we missed, Steve?
I don't think so. I think that's covered them off. And look, hopefully we can continue our good form from the ATP and the WTA ones. I think between us all, we
pick the winner of every event.
Yeah, we
know, baby.
Yeah. I don't even know why we've continued. We should have just stopped there. And,
season's over.
Yeah, season's over. Cool.
You're worried? I mean, lock it down, folks. We could put three names out there. We got Oong, we got Nakashima, we got Husler. It's one of the three.
Let's go with that. And look, there are a couple of outright markets around worldwide, but there isn't enough for us to kind of dive in and pick and really extract odds, because look, I can't access any from where I'm at the moment. But hopefully it's a good week of tennis, I guess, thinking about all these players that, it's a good opportunity with the top players currently sitting in hotels for 14 days.
That's true. And if you do have outrights, folks, you can send us a DM on Twitter. We are at Eat Sleep Tennis. Send us what you got. We'd be happy to answer any questions and try to advise you a little bit if you have some of those prices. Honestly, I'd be curious to see what's floating out there, because I looked around and didn't find anything myself. All right. Anything else from you guys here before I think we wrap it up?
I think I've spoken enough about the Australian Open over the last 24 hours. But look, we might, if things continue to kind of, stew over the next couple of days, we might jump on and do a little bit of a catch up as to what's been going on about 25 minutes from my place down here in Melbourne.
Eat Sleep Tennis, the Novak Djokovic special.
Oh, maybe. I don't know. I don't know if I'm prepared to go down that well again. I think last time I went down that well, I think I got attacked on social media by every account that had a crocodile in their name that I could possibly come across. So that's yeah, that was a fun part of my life. I think and look, this won't turn this to become explicit, but I think the best label I got called after I last wrote something about Novak Djokovic was, I think I was called Pond Scum. So they're creative, but look, we'll see what happens. Look, obviously he's put out a couple of requests for the rest of the players, which is interesting because he's not in Melbourne. He's over in Adelaide, living it up in bigger area over there. So look, it'll be interesting to see what unfolds over the next couple of days, but also towards the end of quarantine. But then once the players actually take to the court for what's a big 3 weeks of tennis.
Indeed. Well, thanks everybody for watching. Thanks for listening, because of course, not only is this live, it'll be out on a podcast shortly thereafter. If you're watching this on YouTube, click the little thumbs up button. We'd love that, and a subscription. We'd love a rating and review on whatever app you're using to listen to the podcast. And we'll be back soon. I think we've got at least another probably 2 weeks until an ATP or WTA tournament, but we will have another Challenger tournament soon. So see you then, folks.